The alien academy of Urakal hung in the black of space like a jewel made of light and metal. Its long silver corridors were filled with the most dangerous young creatures in the galaxy, the children of warlords, hunters, and predators. They came to learn how not to kill, how to be civilized. And among them walked a human, Captain Elias Ward. He was the only one of his kind on the entire station. No claws, no fangs, no armor, no venom. Just a man small, scarred, and tired, surrounded by beings that could tear through walls. Some called him brave, most called him insane. But Elias had a job. He was there to teach the monsters compassion. The training arena trembled under the weight of a dozen cadets, each one larger than him, faster than him, stronger than him. They stood in a wide circle, their eyes glowing, tails twitching, horns scraping the air. The air smelled of metal and musk and electricity. Elias stood in the middle of them, holding nothing but a wooden staff. "Remember," he said, his voice calm, "power means nothing without control." A Eskaran cadet, tall, black-scaled, eyes burning gold, stepped forward with a low growl. "You are weak, human. How can prey teach the hunters?" Elias smiled slightly. "By surviving them." The cadet roared and lunged. The sound shook the walls. Elias didn't move until the last second. He sidestepped, twisted, and tapped the creature's arm with the staff. Just a touch, but the impact threw the cadet off balance, stumbling forward into the ring's edge. The others hissed in surprise. The Eskaran froze, humiliated. Elias lowered the staff. "You see, control, not rage, again." From the glass balcony above, the alien instructors watched silently. Massive forms, their faces unreadable. Some whispered, others scoffed. "He taunts them," said one, a feathered creature with 4 bright eyes. "He'll die one day, and it will be his fault." Another shook its scaled head. "No," it said softly. "He teaches them to think, to feel. That is what makes the humans dangerous." When training ended, Elias dismissed the cadets and sat on the edge of the ring, catching his breath. His body ached. Every class left him bruised, but he didn't show it. He couldn't. Respect here was won through endurance, not pity. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small hollow device. The screen flickered to life, showing 2 small faces, a boy and a girl, no older than 6. His twins, born on this station, raised under alien stars. Their laughter filled the little room through the tiny speakers. He smiled for the first time that day. He tapped the image, whispering, "Hey, my stars, Daddy's almost done." A voice recording played back, his daughter's voice, light and happy. "Be brave, Daddy. Don't let the big ones scare you." He chuckled softly. "I'm trying, sweetheart." Outside the academy windows, the red star pulsed weakly, spilling crimson light across the void. Urakal's corridors glowed dimly beneath the emergency systems that always seemed half-broken. The academy had been built from the bones of an old warship, a place meant to hold power, not peace. That night, Elias walked the halls alone. The silence felt heavy. He passed sealed doors and holographic warnings. One caught his eye, a reinforced gate marked with black lettering, Sector 3, Containment. He stopped for a moment. Behind that door was the reason the academy existed. The Eskaran Prime, a full-grown predator, a war beast captured from its home world after it destroyed an entire colony. They said its scream could melt glass, that it had killed 50 soldiers before they brought it down. It was here for rehabilitation. But Elias knew the truth. It wasn't a prisoner, it was a study. He moved on, shaking the thought away. In the officers' mess hall, a few instructors sat around the long metal tables, eating in silence. When Elias entered, the room fell quieter still. They always did that. Conversations paused. Eyes followed him. A few nodded politely, most didn't. He poured himself a cup of something close to tea, dark, bitter, alien, and sat alone at the corner table. He preferred it that way. The chair across from him creaked under new weight. He looked up to see a towering figure, Commander Rykath, head of security. A full-blooded Eskaran, scales black as night, eyes like fire. The same species as the creature locked below. "Human," the commander rumbled. "A word." Elias nodded warily. "Of course, Commander." Rykath leaned forward, the table groaning under his claws. "You will stay clear of Sector 3 tomorrow. We begin containment drills, no exceptions." "I'm not assigned there," Elias said. "But is there a reason for the extra precautions?" "The beast grows restless," Rykath said. It senses something, it dreams of the hunt again. Ilias frowned. And what do you do when a caged creature dreams of freedom? The commander's voice turned low. You remind it why it was caged. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither looked away. Then Rykath stood, his claws scraping the metal floor. You have courage, human, but courage without armor is suicide. He left without another word. Ilias watched him go, jaw tight. He didn't believe in cages, not for thinking beings, not for creatures that could feel fear, pain, or loss. The Academy said it was about control, but all he saw was fear hiding behind rules. And yet he understood. Some of these predators were nightmares come to life. Still, a voice deep inside whispered, everything has a reason for what it becomes. He looked down at his hands, so small, so human, and yet still shaking the stars. The next morning came too early. Ilias woke to the soft hum of the station's lights rising. He stretched, dressed, and stepped into the corridor. A few cadets passed by, some greeting him with respectful nods, others pretending not to see him. It didn't matter. Progress was slow, but it was there. He was heading to the nursery next, his favorite stop before the day began. His twins loved watching the ships outside the viewport, their small faces pressed to the glass. It was his one moment of peace before facing the chaos of teaching aliens how not to kill. He was almost there when the alarms went off. A blinding red flash filled the hall. The sound was deafening, a low, rising scream that made the air shake. Alert, containment breach. Sector 3, Predator Class Escaron Prime. Ilias froze. Then he ran. The metal floor trembled beneath his boots as the sirens echoed through every corridor. Voices shouted over comms, orders, panic, chaos. The Academy shook as if the star itself were roaring in anger. He didn't think about the drills. He didn't think about safety protocols. He didn't even think about the other instructors. He thought only of one thing. The nursery was below Sector 3. That's where his children were. He ran faster, heart hammering, lungs burning. Behind him, doors sealed with heavy thuds. Ahead, the corridor lights flickered, casting long shadows. And then, through the din, he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to any alarm. A sound that made every living thing freeze. A roar, deep, endless, and full of hunger. The predator was free, and Ilias Ward was running straight toward it. The lights flickered as Ilias ran through the corridor, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The alarms screamed above him, echoing through every steel wall. Red warning lights washed the hallway in color, turning everything into a nightmare of shadows and flashing sirens. Containment breach, Sector 3, Predator Class Escaron Prime. The words kept repeating from the station's automated voice, calm, robotic, and merciless. Ilias didn't care. He was running toward the sound everyone else was running from. His breath came ragged, every step heavy with fear. Around him, alien cadets and instructors bolted through the halls, their claws scraping against the floor as they fled. A tall insectoid shouted something about sealing bulkheads, but Ilias barely heard him. He had only one thought. His children were in the nursery, and the nursery was right under Sector 3. He turned the corner and slammed his hand against a wall panel. The screen lit up, showing a map of the Academy, a flashing red section where containment had failed. He traced the routes with shaking fingers. The fastest path was also the most dangerous. He went anyway. The floor trembled. Somewhere above him, something massive roared. The sound was deep and terrible, not a roar of anger, but of freedom. Metal screamed as it was torn apart. Ilias didn't have to imagine what it looked like. He had seen the Escaron Prime before through thick glass from a safe observation deck. It was a creature of black armor and muscle, eyes like liquid gold, claws that could cut through bulkhead steel. It had been sleeping then, sedated and bound by energy fields. Now it was awake. He reached the access elevator, slammed the emergency override, and descended. The walls shook as the cables strained. A dull explosion echoed above the sound of containment seals breaking. When the doors opened, the smell hit him, sharp metal and ozone like burned air. He stepped out into a corridor filled with smoke and sparks. The lights were dying. He passed 2 alien guards, or what was left of them. Their armor was torn open, their weapons shattered. He forced himself not to look too closely. He moved forward, crouched low, the pulse of adrenaline turning fear into focus. Every nerve screamed, "Move faster." The nursery was only a few halls away. A low growl rolled through the corridor. Elias froze. The shadows moved at the end of the hall. For a moment he saw nothing, only flickering lights and drifting smoke. Then a shape emerged, crawling on 6 limbs, claws gouging deep lines into the floor. The Escaron Prime. It was even larger than he remembered. Its black hide gleamed wet under the flashing red lights. Its tail swayed behind it like a living blade. Each step made the air tremble. It hadn't seen him yet. It was sniffing the air, slow, methodical, its nostrils flaring. Elias backed away step by silent step until his back hit a wall. His mind raced. He had no weapon, no armor, no backup. Then he saw something glint near the wall, a maintenance panel, half open, with a small emergency kit inside. He lunged for it, praying it wasn't empty. It was. He grabbed the first thing he saw, a plasma extinguisher. It was meant for fire, not monsters, but it was all he had. He raised it just as the creature's head snapped toward him. 2 golden eyes locked on his. The growl turned into a roar that tore through the corridor like thunder. Elias fired. A jet of supercooled gas exploded from the nozzle, hitting the beast square in the chest. It staggered back with a shriek that made his ears ring. Steam filled the hall as frost raced across its armor plates. Elias didn't wait. He turned and ran. He sprinted down the hall, through a broken security door and into the lower nursery block. Smoke trailed behind him. His hands shook, his lungs burned, but he didn't stop. When he reached the nursery, the door was gone. It hadn't opened, it had been ripped apart. The frame was twisted metal. The smell of acid and ozone was stronger here. He stepped inside slowly. The room was silent, cribs overturned, toys scattered. One wall was torn open to the corridor beyond. "Anna Leo," his voice cracked. "It's Dad, answer me." A small sound came from under a collapsed table, a whimper. He dropped to his knees, shoved the debris aside, and saw 2 small shapes pressed together in the shadows. His twins, their faces streaked with tears, their eyes wide with terror. "Daddy," they cried. He gathered them both into his arms, holding them tight. "I've got you, you're safe now." He didn't feel safe. He could feel the tremor in the floor again, the heavy, rhythmic thud of something approaching. The Escaron was coming. He looked around desperately. The exit was blocked. The backup doors were sealed. His only option was through the breach in the wall back toward the containment wing. He turned to move and then froze. There was something else in the wreckage. 3 small, pale shapes curled together in a torn blanket. Not his children. Escaron hatchlings. Tiny, fragile things with scaled skin and soft tails, sleeping amid the chaos. Elias' mind flashed back to the reports. The adult Escaron had gone berserk after losing its offspring. The scientists had separated them for study. That was today. He looked down at the sleeping hatchlings, then at his own children clinging to his neck. His heart ached. He knew what that roar meant now. The creature wasn't just killing, it was searching. And the thing it was searching for was lying in his arms. A shadow filled the doorway. The air grew heavy. The Escaron Prime stepped into the room, its golden eyes locking onto him, onto the human crouched among the debris, holding both its young and his own. Elias raised his head, trembling, his children clutching his shirt. The predator took 1 step forward. Its claws scraped the floor, its breath was fire. Then, as its gaze fell on the small Escaron cubs pressed against the man's chest, the beast stopped. Everything went silent. The monster's roar died in its throat. The golden eyes widened, filled not with rage, but something else. Recognition. For a long moment there was no sound, no movement, just the thrum of broken lights and the faint hum of dying power. Elias didn't breathe. His twins clung to his shirt, their tiny hands gripping hard enough to hurt. The Escaron Prime filled the doorway like a living shadow, its golden eyes glowing in the dark. Smoke curled around its limbs as it crouched low, claws scraping the floor. He expected it to lunge, to strike. Instead, it stopped. Its nostrils flared, its massive head tilted slightly. The rumbling growl in its chest softened into a strange, almost broken sound, a low, trembling trill. Elias realized then that the creature wasn't looking at him. It was looking at what was in his arms. He glanced down. Against his chest, wrapped in a torn blanket, the three small Escaran hatchlings stirred, soft, frail, unaware of the danger towering above them. They let out faint chirps, confused but unharmed. The great predator shuddered, its breathing ragged. It took another slow step closer, lowering its head until its eyes were level with Ilia's. He could feel the heat of its breath, the weight of its presence. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he didn't move. He couldn't. The hatchlings were still pressed against him, half tangled with his own children. It was chaos and peace all at once, predator and prey, parent and parent. Ilia swallowed hard. His voice came out soft, shaking. "Easy, easy now, I'm not going to hurt them." The Escaran blinked, its pupils dilated then narrowed again. The sharp ridge of its mouth trembled. A deep rumble escaped it, but this one was not rage, it was sorrow. The room flickered with emergency light. The predator crouched lower, and Ilias could see what the reports had failed to capture, the scars. Thick, cruel burns along its neck and chest where energy restraints had dug into its flesh. There were markings there too, faint but visible, carved in by scientists' experiment numbers, tracking tags, cruel reminders of captivity. It wasn't just a beast, it was a prisoner. And now it had found what had been stolen from it. Ilias slowly shifted, making sure his movements were calm, visible. His twins whimpered, but he whispered to them gently, "It's okay. Don't move, stars, stay still." The Escaran's eyes flicked to his children, studying them small, soft, trembling, then back to him. Something in its expression changed. It tilted its head slightly, confusion in its gaze. It could smell his fear, but also something else, something that didn't fit the pattern. Compassion. A tremor ran through the floor, heavy footsteps and the whir of weapons. The security teams were coming. The sound echoed closer with every second. The predator turned its head sharply toward the hall, its body tensing. "No, no, no," Ilias whispered. He could see the creature's claws flex, muscles tightening for battle. It thought they were coming to take its cubs again. He had seconds. Ilias made a choice. He slowly stood, every muscle screaming, and held the hatchlings out toward the creature. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was doing. "Take them," he said softly. "They're yours." The Escaran stared at him, frozen. The low sound in its throat deepened, not a growl, but something like disbelief. Ilias took a small step forward. His twins whimpered again, clinging tighter, but he whispered to them, "It's okay, Daddy. Here, trust me." He knelt down, lowering the small alien cubs to the ground between them. The Escaran's eyes followed every movement. Its breath came faster. Then, slowly, painfully slowly, it reached out. One massive claw touched the blanket. The hatchlings chirped. The predator made a sound that shook Ilias to his core, a broken, trembling call that was half growl, half sob. It gathered the hatchlings close, curling its body protectively around them. The low rumble that filled the room wasn't rage anymore. It was something ancient, parental. Ilias took one step back, then another. He didn't want to startle it, didn't want to ruin the fragile calm. The sound of boots and armor grew louder. A voice shouted from the hall, "Containment team approaching, target located." The Escaran's head snapped up, eyes flashing. It hissed, its tail lifting high. Ilias turned toward the hall and shouted, "Stand down, don't fire." No one listened. A group of armored soldiers burst through the ruined doorway, weapons raised. Their helmets reflected the flickering light. "Target in sight," one barked, "engaging." Ilias moved before he could think. He threw himself in front of the creature, arms spread wide. "Stop." The soldiers froze. "Human, get out of the way." "They're not attacking," Ilias shouted. "The cubs look." For a moment no one moved. The predator loomed behind him, its massive form trembling, its claws sheathed. The hatchlings chirped softly under its chest. Ilias' voice broke. "It's not fighting, it's protecting them, just like we would." "Silence." The team leader hesitated, weapon still raised, finger tight on the trigger. Behind Ilias, the Escaran's breathing slowed. Its gaze flicked between him and the soldiers. The tension was a living thing, a thread stretched to breaking. Then the commander lowered his weapon, slowly. "Hold fire," he said. The others followed his lead. The air seemed to breathe again. Ilias turned back. The Eskaran watched him, golden eyes filled with something almost human, confusion, sorrow, and gratitude. It touched its forehead to the ground near him, a gesture he didn't understand but felt deep in his chest. He exhaled, shaking. His children clung to him, tears streaking their faces. He held them close and whispered, "It's over, we're okay." For the first time since the alarms had sounded, he believed it. The predator gathered its young and curled around them. Its eyes never left him. And Elia's ward, fragile, soft, human, met the gaze of a creature born for war, and saw not a monster but a parent. The nursery was silent again. Only the slow, heavy breathing of the Eskaran prime filled the air. Its massive form curled protectively around its cubs, the metal floor cracking slightly under its weight. The light from the broken ceiling flickered over its scales, painting it in gold and shadow. Elias didn't move. His back was still pressed against the wall, his arms around his twins. They trembled quietly, their small faces buried against his chest. He could feel their hearts pounding against his ribs, matching his own. The security team stood frozen in the doorway, their rifles lowered but ready. They didn't understand what they were seeing. The beast they had been trained to fear, to kill if necessary, was lying motionless in the wreckage, not attacking, not roaring, simply holding its young close. And the human, the fragile, unarmed teacher, stood between them like a wall. Elias' throat was dry. He spoke softly, but every word carried across the room. "Do you see now, it's not a monster?" One of the guards shifted uneasily. "Sir, it's still dangerous." "So are we," Elias cut in. "Every species in this place was dangerous once. That's why the Academy exists, to teach what strength really means." He looked back at the Eskaran. Its golden eyes watched him, unblinking but calm. In those eyes, he saw something raw, confusion, grief, but also trust. A fragile trust that could vanish in an instant. Behind him, the team commander's voice came over the comms. "Containment units en route. Orders are to neutralize if resistance continues." Elias' stomach turned cold. Neutralize meant kill. He stepped forward, blocking the line of sight. "Call them off." "Human, you don't understand." "I understand enough," Elias snapped. "You fire that weapon, you'll start another war." The silence that followed was heavy. The soldiers looked at one another, uncertain. None of them wanted to be the one to fire first. Elias turned back toward the creature. Slowly, carefully, he crouched down again so that he was at eye level with it. His twins clung to him tighter, but he whispered, "It's okay, stars, Daddy's got you." The Eskaran rumbled low in its chest. It was a deep, resonant sound that made the air vibrate, not a threat, but a warning. It was watching everything, the guards, the movement of their weapons, even the blinking lights on the wall. Elias could almost feel its thoughts. It didn't want to fight. It only wanted to keep what was left of its family safe. He spoke softly, voice barely above a whisper. "I know why you broke free. They took your children. I would have done the same." The creature's head tilted, golden eyes narrowing slightly. A sound escaped its throat, something like a soft hiss mixed with a broken cry. "I know," Elias said again. "You were scared." He took a deep breath and pointed toward the far end of the room where the wall had been torn open into the empty maintenance tunnel. "You can go that way. It leads to the outer deck. There's air, there's quiet. But please," his voice broke slightly, "don't hurt anyone, please." The Eskaran didn't move. It stared at him, unmoving, its breath echoing deep and slow. Then, at last, it looked down at its cubs. The hatchlings stirred, soft trills and gentle chirps. They blinked up at their parent and rubbed against its scales. The predator made a low sound in reply, one that could only be described as tender. Then it began to rise. The guards flinched immediately, raising their weapons again, but Elias lifted his hand. "Don't." The Eskaran stood tall, towering above them all, its body blocking the lights. It scooped its hatchlings into the crook of one massive arm and turned toward the broken wall. It stopped only once, looking down at Elias again. For a heartbeat, time stood still. Man and monster, parent and parent. The Eskaran lowered its head slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Then it turned and moved through the breach, its heavy footsteps fatting down the tunnel until the sound disappeared completely. Elias let out a long, shaking breath. His knees gave out and he sank to the floor. The commander slowly lowered his rifle. "What in the void just happened?" he muttered. Elias didn't answer right away. He was too busy holding his children, too lost in the swirl of fear and relief crashing through him. But when he finally looked up, his eyes were steady. "I told you," he said quietly. "You don't tame monsters, you understand them." Hours later, the academy was still in lockdown. Repair drones crawled along the halls, patching holes and sealing doors. Rumors spread like wildfire that the Escaron Prime had escaped into space, that the human instructor had fought it barehanded, that the whole station had nearly been destroyed. Elias sat in the medical bay with his twins sleeping beside him. Their small hands still clung to his shirt even in their dreams. He brushed their hair back gently, exhaustion pulling at his body. A soft hiss of the door drew his attention. Commander Rykath entered, his tall frame barely fitting through the doorway. His scales glimmered under the pale lights. "You should not be alive," the commander said gruffly. Elias managed a tired smile. "I've heard that before." Rykath stared at him for a long time, his golden eyes unreadable. The Escaron Prime could have killed everyone here, and yet it did not. Elias nodded. Because it wasn't trying to destroy anything, it was trying to save what it loved. The commander's expression shifted, something like confusion, maybe respect. "You risked your life for a predator." Elias looked down at his sleeping children. "No," he said softly, "I risked it for a parent." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then finally, Rykath bowed his head slightly, a gesture rare among his kind. "Perhaps," he said, "the galaxy still has something to learn from humans after all." Elias exhaled slowly. He didn't feel like a hero, just a man who'd done what any father would do. He looked out the small viewport beside the bed. Far beyond, the red star still burned weakly in the dark, wounded but alive. Just like him, and somewhere out there, drifting in the void, a mother of monsters carried her children to safety. The red star outside Urakel burned faintly through the Academy's viewports, casting long crimson shadows through the glass corridors. The alarms were silent now, but the memory of their scream still echoed in everyone's minds. The great predator was gone. The humans had survived, yet the Academy did not feel safe, it felt changed. Every corridor whispered about the man who had faced a monster and lived. Some called him reckless, others called him lucky. But none could explain what really happened in that nursery. Elias Ward didn't care what they called him. He wasn't looking for glory. He just wanted to hold his children again and believe that it was finally over. He sat on the medical bay cot, his arm wrapped in a bandage, exhaustion painted across his face. His twins slept beside him, curled up beneath a thin blanket. Their faces were calm now, the fear of the attack finally faded into dreams. He brushed a hand over their hair, his voice low. "You did so good, my stars, so brave." The door slid open with a hiss. Commander Rykath entered, towering as always, his black gold scales shining under the pale lights. But something was different this time, his movements slower, heavier. "You look tired," Elias said with a faint smile. Rykath rumbled softly, a sound between amusement and a sigh. "I could say the same to you, human." He paused, glancing at the children, then added quietly, "The Council is demanding an inquiry. They want to know why the creature was not terminated." Elias' smile faded, because killing it would have been murder. The commander's eyes narrowed. The Escaron Prime was a weapon of war. It slaughtered thousands before it was captured. "And we made it worse," Elias said. "We took its young, we locked it up and treated it like a beast instead of a being. What did we think would happen?" For a moment, Rykath said nothing. The two of them stood in silence, the hum of the medical machines filling the space between their words. Then at last the commander spoke, softer this time. "You think compassion can tame what fear never could?" Elias looked up at him. "No, I think compassion reminds them they don't have to be what we fear." Rykath's golden eyes lingered on him for a long moment, then the great warrior bowed his head, a rare gesture among his kind. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "the humans are not as weak as we believed." The following day, the Academy gathered in the main hall, a vast chamber filled with creatures of every shape and color. The upper balconies were lined with guards, and at the center stood the great dais of the High Council. Elias stood below them, his children watching from the sidelines with one of the nurses. He had refused armor or medals. He came as he was bruised, tired, but unbroken. One of the counselors, a tall avian with silver feathers, spoke first. Captain Ward, you disobeyed protocol, you endangered cadets and staff, and yet you prevented a massacre." The words echoed through the hall. Hundreds of eyes turned toward him, some full of respect, others filled with suspicion. Elias met their gaze calmly. "I didn't prevent a massacre," he said. "I stopped a parent from losing what little it had left." A murmur swept the crowd. "You showed the Escaran mercy," another counselor said coldly. "But mercy does not change nature. The creature will kill again." Elias' voice hardened. "And we'll keep killing too, won't we? Until someone decides to stop being afraid long enough to understand the other side." The hall went still. He took a slow step forward, his eyes steady on the council. "You built this academy to teach peace to predators, to stop endless wars, but peace isn't chains and cages, it's choice. The Escaran chose not to kill when it could have. That means there's still hope." For a moment, no one spoke. Then from somewhere in the hall, a cadet began to clap, a slow, uncertain sound that echoed across the chamber. Another joined, then another. Within seconds, the hall was full of noise, applause from claws, talons, and hands alike. The council didn't stop them, they simply watched. That night, Elias stood by the observation deck with his twins. The red star shone weakly in the dark, its dying light washing the glass in crimson. His daughter pressed her face against the window. "Do you think it's out there, Daddy? The big one." He smiled softly. "I think so, sweetheart." His son frowned. "Do you think it remembers us?" Elias looked out into the stars. "I hope it does." He imagined the creature, drifting far beyond the station, its great wings folded around its cubs, the stars reflecting off its golden eyes. Somewhere, maybe it was watching the same red light, wondering about the fragile little being who had held its children and not run. Maybe it didn't understand why a creature so weak had faced it without fear. Maybe that was the point. Later, when his children were asleep, Elias returned to the empty training hall. The lights were dim, the air cold. He stood in the center of the ring where it had all begun and let the silence settle around him. He thought of all the things he had seen: claws, teeth, rage, pain, and how easily the galaxy forgot that behind every set of fangs was something that could love too. He raised the training staff and whispered, "Power means nothing without control." The old words echoed back to him. He smiled faintly, then turned off the lights and left the hall in darkness. Beyond the academy, in the endless black of space, a shadow moved, a massive shape gliding through the quiet like a ghost. The Escaran Prime carried its young across the stars, following no path, hunted by none. It stopped once, turning its head toward the distant red light of Urakel. Its golden eyes flickered. Then it made a sound, low, deep, almost gentle. A call of farewell. And somewhere far behind it, a small human smiled in his sleep, as if hearing it. Because sometimes, understanding didn't need words. Sometimes it was enough just to see the monster and choose not to fear it. Weeks passed after the incident at the academy, but the ripples of that night refused to fade. Every corridor still whispered the same name: Elias Ward. The story had spread far beyond Urakel. Across the stars, soldiers, scholars, and leaders spoke of the human who had faced a Escaran Prime and lived not by force but by mercy. Some called him a fool, others called him a miracle. But Elias didn't care about stories. He cared about peace, fragile, imperfect peace. The academy was repairing its walls, its systems, and its spirit. The students were quieter now, more watchful. Some of the predator species, once proud and cruel, had begun to question what they were taught about strength. And for the first time, many of them looked at Elias Ward not as prey, but as proof. It was dawn when the new alarms blared again. Elias was teaching a combat ethics class when the floor trembled underfoot. The sound wasn't an explosion. It was deeper, a low, rolling vibration that made the lights flicker. The students looked around, their feathers, fur, and scales bristling. "What was that?" one of them hissed. Before Elias could answer, the intercom crackled to life. "Emergency alert. Multiple unidentified ships entering orbit. Power fields compromised. All personnel to evacuation stations immediately." The young cadets froze. Elias' blood went cold. "Move," he ordered. "You know the drill, Formation 3, keep your partners close." They obeyed, rushing for the exits, but even as they moved, Elias knew what was happening. He had seen this before long ago during his military years on Mars. This wasn't a raid. It was an attack. And he already knew by who. The Escaron. The Academy shook as something massive struck its outer hull. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Doors sealed shut. The air filled with static and fear. Elias reached the control hub and found Commander Rykath there, armor scorched, voice rumbling orders. Defensive teams to the lower decks. Lockdown protocols now. Elias grabbed his arm. Who's attacking? Rykath turned to him, golden eyes grim. Escaron warships, a rogue clan. They demand the return of the Prime. Elias' chest tightened. The one that escaped. Yes. He stepped back, heart pounding. Of course, the Escaron Prime hadn't vanished into silence. It had gone home and told its kind what happened. They think we still have it, Elias said quietly. Rykath's claws clenched. They will destroy this place to get it back. Elias' mind raced. We have to show them it's gone, that there's no need for blood. Show them, Rykath growled. Human, they are monsters. They understand only power. Elias looked up at him, his voice steady. Then I'll show them a different kind of power. The next impact was harder. The glass wall of the control room shattered, spraying fragments across the floor. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into a red haze of emergency glow. Through the viewport, Elias saw them, dark shapes dropping from the enemy ships, landing on the outer decks. Tall, armored, and armed. The Escaron warriors were coming. Evacuate the cadets, Elias shouted. Get them to the escape pods. What about you? Rykath demanded. I'll buy you time. Before the commander could argue, Elias was gone, sprinting down the corridor, past the smoke and falling debris. He reached the hangar bay just as the first of the enemy broke through. Their armor gleamed like obsidian, their golden eyes burning with fury. Elias didn't have a weapon. He didn't need one. He grabbed the comm system and keyed it to the external channel. This is Captain Elias Ward of the Uracle Academy, he said, voice steady despite the chaos. We don't have your Prime. It's gone. It escaped with its cubs. We helped it. The Escaron soldiers froze at the sound of his voice. The nearest one snarled, lowering its plasma spear. You lie, it growled. Elias shook his head. No, I saw it myself. I carried its young. It left this place alive. There was a murmur among the warriors, confusion, disbelief. Then, through the broken roof, a voice thundered like the birth of a star. Human. Elias looked up and his heart stopped. Descending through the smoke, wings spread wide, was the Escaron Prime. It had returned. The soldiers fell silent. Even Rykath, arriving with a squad behind Elias, stopped in awe. The massive creature landed in the hangar with a crash, its claws sparking against the metal floor. Its golden eyes glowed brighter than ever, but not with rage, with purpose. It looked down at Elias and let out a deep rumble that shook the walls. Elias stepped forward, trembling but unafraid. You came back. The creature lowered its head until its breath washed over him like fire. The Escaron soldiers shifted uncertainly. Their weapons wavered. Their leader shouted, Prime, these are your captors. Give the command and we will. The Escaron Prime cut him off with a roar that split the air. The soldiers flinched, shrinking back as the Prime's tail slammed against the floor. Then it spoke in its own guttural ancient language, a series of clicks and growls that echoed like thunder. Rykath stiffened, listening through his translator. It says, he looked at Elias, it says the human speaks truth. The soldiers hesitated. Some lowered their weapons. Others turned toward their leader in confusion. Elias took another step forward, his voice strong now. No one here wants war. Take your Prime and go home. Please, don't make this another story of death. The Escaron Prime growled again, the sound rolling through the hangar. Then it turned to its warriors and made a single gesture, a claw across the chest. Submission. One by one, the soldiers knelt. The attack was over. When it was done, the Prime looked down at Elias again. The human stood there, covered in ash and dust, the faint hum of broken lights behind him. The creature leaned close, pressing its forehead gently against his. A silent promise, a wordless thank you. Then it spread its wings and leapt back into the sky, its warriors following behind, leaving only wind and silence in its wake. Elias stood there for a long time, breathing hard, eyes closed. For the second time, he had faced the galaxy's deadliest predator and lived. Not by fighting, by standing. The academy was quiet again. The fires were out, the air scrubbers hummed softly, and the red star outside Uracle burned faint but steady. The halls that had once been filled with chaos now echoed with repair drones and whispers. Peace had returned, but it was not the same peace as before. It was deeper now, heavier, earned. Captain Elias Ward stood by the shattered window of the observation deck, staring out at the stars. His uniform was torn, his face marked with soot and exhaustion. Yet his eyes held something new, something fierce and calm all at once. He had survived the impossible twice. Not through strength, not through power. Through understanding. Behind him, the academy bustled with quiet movement. Students cleaned the debris, instructors checked the wounded. The predators who once laughed at him now bowed their heads when he passed. He didn't see himself as a hero. But the galaxy had already started to. Commander Rykath entered the observation deck, his heavy footsteps echoing softly. He carried a datapad in one clawed hand, his armor scorched and dented from the battle. "You shouldn't be on your feet," he said, his deep voice carrying a hint of something rare, respect. Elias smiled faintly. "I've been sitting long enough, needed to see the stars again." Rykath joined him at the window, silent for a long moment. The dying red sun reflected off his scales. "The Council has sent word. They call this event a miracle." Elias chuckled softly. "Miracle, huh? I call it luck." "Luck doesn't make a Escaran Prime kneel," Rykath said, his tone sharp. "You did what weapons and armies could not." Elias turned to him, tired but steady. "No, I just listened." The commander tilted his head. "You believe listening can stop war?" Elias looked back out at the stars. "It's the only thing that ever has." A small figure appeared in the doorway, his daughter. Her little face was pale, eyes still wide from everything she had seen. She carried her brother's hand in hers. "Daddy," she said softly, "the big one at left right." Elias knelt down, opening his arms. The twins ran to him, and he held them tight. "Yes," he said, "it went home to where it belongs." She looked up at him. "Will it come back?" Elias smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe one day, but if it does, it won't come with claws and fire. It'll come as a friend." The boy frowned, but everyone said it was a monster. Elias met his son's gaze. "Monsters aren't born, they're made. Sometimes all they need is someone brave enough to see the person hiding inside." The boy thought for a moment, then nodded seriously, the kind of nod that only children could give when something finally made sense. Rykath watched them quietly. He had fought in more wars than he could count, commanded legions of predators, seen worlds burn. But he had never seen something like this, a man with no armor, no weapon, standing between death and mercy, and winning both. "Human," the commander said softly, "you've changed this place." Elias rose, holding both of his children's hands. "Maybe," he said, "but change doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us now." Weeks later, the Academy of Uracle reopened. New cadets arrived, some timid, others fierce, but all came with a story on their lips, the story of the human who stood before the predator. The Academy's motto changed too. It used to read, "Power restrained is civilization." Now beneath those words, a new line was carved in glowing script. "Understanding is strength." Elias read those words every morning before class. They reminded him why he was still there, why he still fought not against monsters but against fear. Sometimes in the quiet hours he thought of the Escaran Prime. He would imagine it gliding through space, its cubs grown and strong, teaching them not about rage but about mercy. He liked to believe it remembered him. One evening, as the red sun dipped low and the academy lights dimmed, a sudden pulse swept through the sky, a faint shimmer like lightning across the stars. "Unidentified energy signal," the system AI reported. "Origin unknown." Elias looked up through the glass. At first he saw nothing. Then faintly in the blackness of space, something vast and winged passed between the stars. He smiled, "Hello again." Rykath appeared beside him, eyes narrowing at the sight. "Is that?" Elias nodded. "The Prime." No one spoke. The Escaran Prime circled once, far beyond the Academy's orbit, then released a sound, low, deep, and resonant. Not a roar of fury, but a call that echoed through the void like music. Every being on the station stopped to listen. And in that moment, even the fiercest of predators felt something they had never known before: peace. The great creature turned, spreading its wings wide, and vanished into the stars once more. Later that night, Elias sat with his children by the viewport. His daughter's voice broke the silence. "Daddy, it said goodbye, didn't it?" He nodded, pulling her close. "Yes, it did. Will we ever see it again?" He looked out into the endless dark and smiled softly. "Maybe not, but someone else will, and maybe they'll understand what we learned here." His son frowned. "What did we learn?" Elias looked down at his children, two small hearts that had seen both terror and wonder. Then he looked back at the stars. "That even in a galaxy full of monsters," he said gently, "it's still worth believing in kindness." The next day, life at the academy went on. The cadets trained, the teachers lectured, and Captain Elias Ward, the human who had once been prey, now stood as a symbol of courage and compassion. No one saw him as weak anymore. No one doubted what humans were capable of. Because word had spread far beyond Uracle to every corner of the stars. About the day the predator broke free and stopped when it saw its cubs in the human's arms. And across 1,000 worlds, when they spoke of humanity, they no longer whispered it with fear. They spoke it with respect.